All right, sweet. How are you? This is Coach Alex Van Houten in Better Daily. We are doing our Better Nutrition Workshop for the Faithful 40 Challenge. I hope you're doing super well, and I'm looking forward to fielding your questions tonight as we talk about how to fuel ourselves better through the Faithful 40 Challenge. We've got a lot of things going on tonight, and if you're joining us live, you can drop your questions either here in the Zoom call, or you can do so here in the Better Daily application. And we have a few people who have dropped questions prior to this that we'll make sure that we get to. And so during the workshop, I'll be teaching on a few different subjects, hopefully that generates some practical thoughts and concerns for you that you would like to work into your personal health and fitness practice. And then I will field the questions at our halfway mark and then at the end that have been submitted or generated during this time. That'd be a great time for you to drop those. So I'm looking forward to this. Let's get into tonight. If you're joining us live on the app, one of the things you can't see live is the actual PowerPoint presentation that you can see in the recording here on Zoom. So if I reference a few things from a slide perspective, that's what's going on down here, and we'd love to have you join us in the Zoom room. So our agenda tonight, we're going to talk first a bit about how your nutrition's going and some of the premise behind what we're doing in the Faithful 40 Challenge. We are on day 10 as of, well, today's the end of day 9 technically, so day 10 is tomorrow. And then we'll get into an overview of better nutrition. What does that even mean when we talk about that in the Faithful 40 Challenge? Then we'll talk about basic and advanced nutrition interventions. There are a plethora of things that we can dive into tonight in order to help you make the most of your nutrition practice throughout the next, 31 days. There we go. That's how much time is left in the Faithful 40. And that said, if you have questions, comments, or concerns about those things, please drop them in the comments or ask them here in the Zoom, and we'll get into them. And then we'll talk about primary foods. Tonight, one of the things that I want to bring up that we'll be talking more about in our next coaching session, our live coaching session next week, is primary foods. And I want to introduce that concept tonight and talk a bit about it before we actually make that practical and useful later. So that said, let's make sure we're good on this stream. Something weird happened in our stream here. Just 1 second. And coming back live on the app. Sorry if you're joining us on the Zoom room. I'm having a little trouble with our live stream in the app. All right. So here we go. So tonight, we're talking about nutrition, and in the Faithful 40 Challenge, one of the things that we do is that we record our nutrition journal every day, and we post it live publicly in the group. And so some people do that in terms of a macronutrient journal. They might show you how many carbs, fats, and proteins they consume. Some people will include a simple list of the foods that they ate yesterday. Some people will do a detailed journal, and they'll add some cooking and recipes and stuff to that with a brief explanation about some of the things that they're working on from a nutrition perspective. So all those things are really cool and really powerful, and I appreciate the way that everybody's engaging in that. The primary reason we do this in the Faithful 40 Challenge is to bring our awareness around our consistency with regard to nutrition, and to find those little pieces where we can make improvements and draw from the collected wisdom of the group. I found some people who say that journaling their food and knowing that they're going to have to post that helps them to make different decisions throughout their day about how they choose their food. And others say that seeing other people's food journals and getting some inspiration around good snacks and how to balance and get enough protein at dinner time, that sort of thing, seeing that played out in other people's lives makes it easier for them to do the same. And so on those fronts, the Faithful 40 Challenge, this is the only thing we do in the past. The exercise journal that we do is about today's exercise and what we plan to do by the end of the day. And then our mindset is something that we're committing to each day, something that we're putting out into the world and hopefully living by in a way that will manifest well for us. And so nutrition's powerful and important, and I've preached about it before in Better Daily. We'll talk a bit about some of our nutrition philosophy here, but I do want to highlight some of the resources that are already here in the Better Daily application that you might not know about or maybe haven't taken advantage of, and want to make sure that you get to do so. So first of all, check out the nutrition resources. So in the app, in the very top right corner, there are three lines, and if you click on those three lines, you'll see a drop-down menu. And there's a few different things you can choose from, but one of those things is nutrition resources. And that nutrition resources in the application is a folder that goes to meal programming, to handouts and grocery lists and whole foods A to Z and juicing recipes and all kinds of things that can help you get a little more practical with regard to your nutrition practice. And so those resources are there. Some people use them, some people don't even know they exist. And so I wanted to make sure and highlight those there. Another thing you could do in the Better Daily community is you can search. So there's a search function in the app. If you click in the top left, I believe it is, there's a magnifying glass and it lets you search things. If you search the hashtag Try It Tuesday or hashtag nutrition, that will bring you to any of the group posts or group thread posts that highlight different recipes or highlight some of the things that I've posted in the Better Daily community. That can range from supplements to snacks that different people enjoy and are a good way to put superfoods together, and even tea recipes. So there's a whole bunch of stuff kind of wrapped in that those two hashtags. And so if you search those, you can get something out of those. And yeah, thanks, Ange. That's exactly right. Ange was saying, hey, I didn't know that existed until I was kind of scrolling around and goofing around. There's a lot of good information there. So search those hashtags, check out those nutrition resources. Also, the Defining Dad Bod podcast, we call it our partner podcast here at Better Daily. I host that show, and it's not just for dads. There are many people who have found the episodes on emotional eating or fasting 101 or supplements, or I did a part in the True Fit series about macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins, and many people have found those things powerful and helpful, and notwithstanding just the dads in the room. So the Defining Dad Bod podcast is a great resource, and we post some of those episodes here. You can also find those at definingdadbod.com as well. You can follow Better Daily members. Some people don't know this, but here in the app, if you click a profile, you can tell your application to connect you to that person. You can say, I want to connect to that person. What that does is if you have push notifications turned on your mobile device, it allows the app to notify you when that person posts something. So for instance, Ange, who I just referenced in the live, what's up, girl? She loves to post recipes, and Ange has been around the block with regard to health and fitness, and she is in amazing shape for herself. She eats really well, not perfect, she would tell you, but she eats really well. A lot of people would do well to learn from her. So if you want to follow Ange and you want to see some of the recipes that she's posting, then you can click on her profile and connect with her. And what that means is when she posts something in the Better Daily community, then you'll be notified and you can go check out what she's up to. No pressure, girl. I just made you some friends. So make us proud. Actually, you did post a really cool protein recipe, protein ball, like snack ball recipe the other day. That was super cool. So thank you for posting that, because that wasn't actually already in the meal plans, and I thought that was super cool. And then also drop questions as they arise in the group. So some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, it's gonna percolate. You're gonna get some sleep, and then you're gonna wake up and you go, oh man, I want to know XYZ, kind of like Katie asked a question that I'm going to answer tonight in our workshop about body types. And then Janet asked a question about some hard and fast get back into the swing of things recommendations that I might make after vacation. And so I'll talk about that tonight. If those sorts of questions come up, ask them in the Better Daily community. And if you want me specifically to respond to them, then you can tag me in those things too. All you have to do is hit the @ symbol, that's shift number 2, and then, well, on your computer, and on the little keypad with your phone there, it's a little different. Anyway, you press @ and then Coach Alex. and that will tag me in the application, and I'll definitely make sure I connect with you. So tailored for over 50. So let's get into the bulk of this evening. Now, nutrition is something that we define a little bit differently here in the Better Daily community than in other health and fitness communities. Nutrition in other health and fitness communities comes down to balancing calories. Now, I've spoken at length in a number of places about why our food is more than calories. So I'm not going to rehash that entirely here. But one of the things I do want to talk about is right here on the screen in front of you in the PowerPoint presentation here. Calories in versus calories out is a very limited view of our nutrient intake. That means, the food that we're taking in, whether it's 100 calories of spinach or 100 calories of Skittles or 100 calories of sardines, because those are my favorite thing to talk about, regardless of how many calories are in it, it's actually affecting our body in much more complicated ways than just giving energy to the body. And so what you'll see on the right diagram, it's still simplified, but it's a more complicated version of what food actually does in our body, instead of just the standard draw a box around a stick figure, talk about how many calories are coming in versus calories coming out. Nutritional input can make up internal messengers. That is, parts of our food speak to parts of our body directly. It can also make up external messengers, meaning that not only can nutrition influence different things that our body does on the inside, but it can also trigger several other messengers like hormones and neurotransmitters, for instance, that tell our body what to do with itself as well. Similarly, nutritional input can influence our microbiome. So we're not just feeding ourselves when we consume food, we're also feeding all of the microbiota that make up the food, or excuse me, that make up our gut and that make up our flora, that talk to our body as well. There's actually more DNA of bacteria in you than is of your own DNA on you. So if you're trying to wrap your head around how many organisms you are made of, you're made of way more than just you. And your nutritional input can actually influence that. And then on the other side of things, your nutritional input is not just fuel, it's also the building blocks that your body creates itself out of. So you are, if you're thinking of yourself like a calorie in, calorie out machine, you think of yourself like a car, right? You put in the right kind of fuel, and then maybe you'll get good gas mileage. Maybe the car won't break down, and that would be all well and good, right? That's the food as fuel concept around the health and fitness world. But your body is way more complicated than the car, because not only are you taking in fuel so that you can get from point A to point B and do things and think and exercise and all that stuff, but you're also building yourself out of the food that you eat, which is really cool, because unlike your car, which cannot repair itself out of the fuel that you put into it, your body does repair itself out of the fuel that you consume. And so when we're talking about nutrition tonight, I want you to know that from a energy balance perspective, that's what the health and fitness industry calls this calories thing, energy balance. From an energy balance perspective, there's way more going on the inside of you regarding your nutrition, what your body actually does with what you eat, than how many calories you're consuming. And you'll see that kind of played out as we talk about some of the concepts here. And you'll see me look up every once in a while, or if you're here in the app, you'll see me look at you, and I'm just keeping up with what's going on on the application. Yeah, somebody pointed out, if you're watching on the app, you actually see kind of the green screen behind me, but if you're watching in the recording, what you'll see is the actual screens and presentation here. So if you haven't seen this drawing before, you can catch it on the replay. So some of the core principles of Faithful 40, given that picture you just saw, are four. We've got bio-individuality, we've got quality more than quantity, we've got crowding out, and we've got deconstructing cravings. Where this comes out is when you are journaling your food every single day, some things will occur to you. First, bio-individuality. That's the idea that everyone's needs are unique. Remember, I said that our microbiome, our body is home to microbiome. That's microbiota that make you up. Yours might be a little bit different from mine, depending on where you live, how you eat, and then also your personal genetic makeup, which is different from mine as well, because you don't look just like me. Those things play into what's good for you to eat. And this actually harkens to one of the questions that we have tonight. Katie asked in the Better Daily community, is there something to this whole how to eat for my body type thing? So she was talking about how she's seeing, marketing perhaps, or some advice from Instagram that's saying, hey, if you're pear shaped, you should eat this way. And if you're a mesomorph, you should eat this way. And if you're apple shaped, which means you have a lot of, body fat around your visceral area rather than down in your hips and thighs, then you should eat this way. And they've named a few things. I've seen things like this with regard to intermittent fasting. They're like, you have the wheat belly type and you have the menopausal type or whatever. And so the question is, does my body type affect how I should eat? And it's a really good question. It kind of comes down to this core principle of bio-individuality. How, or excuse me, what dictates our body type? Because, body types are our construct or our categorization of different ways that people look, right? And the the idea that you should eat differently because of how you look is actually kind of rooted in the idea that there are good ways for certain people to eat and bad ways for those people to eat as well. And I've spoken about this at length when I've talked about philosophies around veganism, or philosophies around carnivorism, which is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. And I've argued that humans are omnivores. We can really survive on just about everything except for, cardboard and Twinkies. We can survive for a little while on Twinkies, but not super long and not super happy about it, right? The idea though that our bio-individuality, our particular personal makeup, can influence what would be good for us to eat is a powerful concept, because that means that there are some things that might work well for you that don't work well for me. And you'll see that on the Faithful 40 challenge. You have people from all different walks of life at all different levels of athletic conditioning, and we're all eating different things, right? And the question is, well, should I eat what Alex eats every day? Should I eat what Ange eats every day? Should I eat what Ryan eats every day? What would be best to eat given who I am, right? And that presents the largest challenge in the nutrition industry, which is, what should you eat? Because, you're a special snowflake and everybody's a little bit different. Now, I'll talk a little bit more in a bit about some of the things that influence these factors, but this question of, is there a specific way I should eat given the body type that you see? And the research doesn't really seem to bear that out. Unfortunately, that entire body of knowledge is called nutrigenomics. Nutrigenomics means the study of nutrition around the human genome, what you should eat because of your genetic heritage. And we still haven't gathered enough data to know how to do that yet. You can't, get your finger pricked and then go, okay, you have XYZ A, B, C, D variants of genes, and so here's your perfect meal plan. What's really interesting about that is there are companies that say they do that, and even though they put those things out in the world, people still have a really hard time following their meal plans because, well, how you should eat and what you actually do eat are two different things sometimes. Convenience and taste and budget and desire to eat the same thing every day, all of those things play into what you choose to eat. So anyway, this core concept of bio-individuality is very related to that question. And I'm sorry to say that there's not a lot of science to back up the idea that if you have a pear-shaped body, then you should eat this way or you should avoid these things. I will say that females in general, which is where most of the pear-shaped body types come from, that would be the estrogen dominant body types that collect fat around their glutes and thighs specifically, the female body type in general has a hard time with an excess of energy molecules, specifically carbohydrates and fats. And then carbs, if you're deconditioned, fats specifically, if you are poorly metabolically conditioned. And so on that question, whether or not you should be eating less avocados if you're shaped a certain way and whatnot. That has a lot more to do with your athletic conditioning, those energy molecules, than it does what your particular body type does or doesn't show on you. It's a really good question. The second core principle of the Faithful 40 nutrition is quality over quantity. I've mentioned calories thus far. I've talked about amounts of food. And then even in our True Fit series, I spend some time walking through how to know how many carbs you should eat, how to know how much fat you should eat, how to know how much protein you should eat. And in our last Faithful 40 challenge, if you actually missed the Faithful 40 challenge itself, there's a past workshop where most of our participants had questions about carbs, fats, and proteins. And so we talked about it live in that setting. So if you want to check that out, you can find those in those resources as well, or just tag me in a comment and I'd be happy to share the link with you to check out that replay. But we are interested in the Faithful 40 challenge in focusing on the quality of our food more than we are on the quantity of our food. And that is based on the idea that it's important to feed ourselves what we would like to be built out of. So here's a fun metric for you. So one of the things about calories that's interesting, and I brought this up in my conversation with Lane Norton a couple of years back when we had a discussion about calories being the core foundation for coaching and nutrition and whatnot, is let's say that over the next 20 years, you don't want to gain 50 more pounds than you should, right? You don't want to be 50 pounds overweight 20 years from now. And so, and that's actually the trajectory of America, by the way, just in case you're curious, that over the next 20 years, the average person will gain about 50 pounds. That's the trajectory of our national healthcare crisis around overweight and obesity. And so you would say, okay, well then we just need to eat less calories, right? So how many less calories? How many less calories need to be eaten in order to make sure that we all don't gain 50 pounds in the next 20 years? Well, if you do the math, that's 365 days a year. That's 3,500 calories in 1 pound of fat. And you do the math, then what it turns out to be is that the average person needs to eat about 32 less calories per day. That's it. What's funny about that is if you eat 32 less calories today and then tomorrow you eat 32 less calories, that won't actually matter. It won't actually make a difference. Why? Well, the body doesn't just, become the energy expenditure that you do or don't eat. How you eat affects the kind of machine that you build, which can affect your gas mileage in the future, right? So if the way you're eating right now takes the Corvette that you have right now and turns it into a 3-cylinder hoopty later in the future, then 32 calories difference is not going to make much of a difference. It might be more like 800 less calories that you need to be eating 20 years from now in order not to gain 50 pounds, because what you eat affects the engine that you build over time. And so in the Faithful 40 challenge, we're really interested in the quality of the food that we're eating more than the quantity. We can count the quality, we can make some references about the quality from the quantity, but that's one of the things that I would highly recommend you paying attention to during the Faithful 40 challenge. Then we also talk about crowding out. This is when you're trying to make a positive difference in your nutrition journey. It's easier to add than it is to subtract. It's easier to say, I'm going to add veggies to my diet rather than I'm going to take out everything that's not water from drinking. Like, if you tell me that I need to remove coffee from my diet, I'm going to have a very hard time with that. First of all, I love coffee. Can I get an amen? Second of all, the thing about removing something is that it, at the core of it, you start to feel deprived of it. And that's a problem, because if you're trying to make changes in the long term for your nutrition, which things have to be long term if they're going to make any sort of change to your body, your hormones, your body composition, your muscle, then that said, if you take things out without replacing them with something, then you're going to have a really hard time keeping those things gone. So I've successfully reduced my caffeine intake by adding tea to my life, and some matcha tea with a little bit of peppermint and ginger. in place of a few of the other servings of coffee that I would be drinking if I didn't have an alternative. That's an example of crowding out. I have reduced my caffeine intake. I haven't removed coffee completely. I don't think there's anything wrong with drinking coffee, but I know I was drinking a little too much caffeine at one point in my life. Sleep deprivation and young parenthood is real. But I've crowded some of that out with tea intake, and that's something that I coach many of my clients to do as well. And so in the Faithful 40 challenge, I would encourage you, if you're trying to make changes to your nutrition, it helps to look at your food journal every day and say, is there any way that I can evolve that meal to serve my purposes better tomorrow? Is there anything that I could eat in place of that thing that's higher quality and is better for me over time than that thing that I ate there? And in that way, what you can do over time is you can continue to optimize what we call your default. And that's crowding out the bad habits over time. We had an entire conversation in our Faithful 40 Challenge workshop about cheat meals. And I'm not going to tell you that you can't have your French toast and your carrot cake every now and then. I would encourage you to check out that link. It looks like Kat actually dropped the link here in the live comments if you want to check out that replay. But the idea being that if you get your default all squared away and you're regularly eating things that are good for you, then what happens is the times that you eat things celebratory wise or just for enjoyment, they're not going to have a significantly bad impact on your health because what you're doing most of the time is healthy for you. And then the last thing here under core principles is deconstructing cravings. So a lot of the things that I hear when people are trying to do healthy things for themselves is, oh, I'm craving this, or oh, I'm craving that. How do I get rid of cravings? You don't get rid of cravings by flipping some magic switch, but what you can do is you can deconstruct them. You can figure out why it is that you're having such a problem eating XYZ thing that you just really don't feel like you want to make a part of your diet, right? So for instance, I have a client I work with. She craves ice cream every night at about 7 p.m. It's pretty normal for her. And the question is, why? Like, where does that come from? Where's the craving coming from? We notice that there's a correlation with her weight training program. So if she doesn't get enough good pre-workout carbohydrates in her life before she goes and lifts heavy, one of the things that happens to her before she goes to bed is her body's trying to cash in on that glycogen deficit that she created from her weight training. Weight training is really good for you, but it does burn the heck out of some carbohydrates. And so when she's depleted all those carbohydrates and she hasn't replaced them with anything, her body doesn't really have a recourse. She starts craving ice cream before bed. The other thing that we've noticed about her craving for ice cream is that it's significantly lower when her husband's out of town on business. So the craving for ice cream isn't just a craving that might be from an internal perspective. Hey, I'd like some ice cream, feed me some ice cream. But it also seems to be joined with how they fellowship together. She said that he tends to bring the ice cream to the living room. And so, well, one thing leads to another. And that's what being married's all about, right? So anyway, that said, that's not what being married's all about. But I hope you got a chuckle out of that anyway. So the ice cream craving is not just a craving for ice cream. It's a rebound from not getting enough pre-workout carbohydrates for sustaining those weightlifting bouts and recovering you well. And also the craving also is paired with not just a relationship, but also somebody who's bringing ice cream to the picture. So maybe we can find a different snack that we have. Maybe we can change the location of things. Maybe it's a simple conversation with hubby to enjoy his ice cream at lunchtime rather than after dinner. And so you don't suck me into your ice cream habits, not tonight anyway. And so that being said, that's a very important core principle from a nutrition perspective, is being able to take steps back from cravings and understand where they're coming from, so that you can take steps forward and replace them with something better. And there's something very empowering about choosing what you eat as opposed to feeling like you don't have a choice over what's happening to you with regard to your food. And it's really important to be able to talk through that and walk that conversation back and figure out where those cravings are coming from. So I've said a lot of things. I'm going to talk about the practical application of nutrition science and some basic and advanced interventions in just a second. But if you're joining me on the app or you're joining me in Zoom, I want you to be able to ask any questions that I've brought up for you before we move on. So, Janet, I do know your question about how to get back into the swing of things after vacation. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But if anybody has any other questions, I'm going to give just a second here on the app or here in Zoom to ask those, and then we'll keep rolling. So go right ahead. I need to Google matcha. Yeah, matcha is just green tea powder. So nothing super special about that. It's matcha is actually what you use to make green tea, but it's also edible. So you can buy it in powdered form and put it on your Greek yogurt. My wife calls it my bougie Greek yogurt with my matcha and chia powder and hemp hearts and goji berry powder and stuff. But it's very good, and it's got a little bit of L-theanine in it. It's got a little bit of caffeine in it. It's got a few other antioxidants that are worth consuming. So matcha, good stuff. Good stuff. Questions? We good? Thumbs up all around. All right, I'm getting the green light. Great. So as we're moving into this section, this is a lot. I don't know if the rest of this has been a lot to you or not, but this is potentially mind numbing. So hang with me here, because when it comes to nutrition, there are so many complicated factors that influence whether or not what you're eating is good for you, or whether or not you should make some changes to your habits and what sort of changes you could make, that it's very difficult to simplify. And if anybody says, hey, I have this real simple meal plan, or I have this real simple thing, or you have this, silver bullet supplement that you need to take and it'll fix all your nutrition problems, they're straight up lying to you, because nutrition is very complicated. You are a complicated biological organism. In fact, you might be the most complicated thing that we know of in the known universe. And it's very complicated to feed you well. It's complicated to get the most out of you. It's complicated to build the best version of you and keep you moving forward well. And so that said, when I talk about all these factors with regard to nutrition, just know I don't want it to be mind-numbing to you so much as it could be awe-inspiring. It could be awe-inspiring to say, wow, I have a lot of room to grow and learn in my own nutrition journey to get the most out of myself. And that's really the name of the game here, is how do we build the best version of us? How do we fuel ourselves well? How do we get the most out of us so that we can be that 1% better every single day? So on the left here, you'll see individual genetic expression. That's you, the special snowflake at conception. Nobody has your DNA configuration unless you have a identical twin, right? So you have that individual genetic expression. And then on the left here, you'll see all the biological factors that influence what you should eat. And then on the right, you'll see the psychosocial factors that influence what you should eat. And then it all comes down every single day to what you actually do eat. So what you put in your mouth and whether or not that's good for you. So on the left there, the biological factors, you have your microbiota. Remember, those are the little bugs that live as a part of you. They're on your skin, they're in your eyes, they're in your nose, they're in your large intestine. Then you have your dietary intake. Those are the micros and macros, the energy periodization, when you should have carbohydrates in your day, how much of what sorts of fats might be good for you, that sort of thing. Then you have your exercise program. So how intensely are you exercising, or at what volume of exercise are you exercising, or what types of exercise are you exercising? That's consistency and periodization. And that's also achievement and fulfillment. And then last but not least, on the biological side, is rest and recovery. These are the factors that help your body rebuild itself out of the food that you eat. And so that's your sleep, and then also whether or not you're going to get a vacation anytime soon, right? So those are all biological factors that influence what goes into your mouth and how your body handles it. And then you have the psychosocial factors, which are preferences. Maybe you don't like the same foods that I like, even though I might get my healthy fats from one source, but might recommend a different healthy fat source to you. For instance, I love sardines. Most people don't love sardines. Most people would like sardines if they gave them a shot and used some good seasoning. But hey, whatever. So I get my healthy fats from sardines. My wife does not like sardines, but she does like olives. I don't like olives, but she can get some healthy fats from olives that I can't get, right? So preferences really influence what we eat on a regular basis. Then time and skills also affect what we eat. Some folks might have a really hard time preparing certain dishes, and other folks might not have the time necessarily to put into getting the most out of their food. And so efficiency has to be a factor for them. Relationships can also be a factor. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old at home. So what they're willing to eat influences what I buy and what I prepare for dinner. Excuse me. Emotional regulation also influences what we eat on the psychosocial front. So emotional eating is a thing. It's not just you. We've all been doing it since we were a day old. How does an infant tell you it's hungry? It cries. And how do you stop an infant crying? You feed it. And so we've been emotionally eating since before we can remember anything. And emotional regulation is also one of the reasons that folks eat. We also do it at special occasions like birthday parties. We don't do spinach and chicken around the table. Like, nobody puts your little candle in a chicken thigh and is like, happy birthday to you. No, we put it in cake. We put it in a fat, wrapped in sugar, wrapped in more fat, and topped with sugar and fat. Why? Why do we do that? Well, it actually boosts the serotonin of everybody in the room. And so it's kind of a ceremonial emotional regulation in celebration for something. That's birthday cake, and that's cross-cultural. That's not just here in the Western world. And so we eat for more reasons than just the relationships and time and skills and preferences. Emotional regulation is part of that. Budget can be part of that as well. Some folks might not be able to afford certain things that might be recommended in health food books. I will tell you right now that I'm not going to pay the price for some of those expensive recipe items like saffron, or I don't know, jasmine garlic. I don't know if that exists, but I, I bought a paleo cookbook once and I was like, I'm going to go through this whole thing. And by the 4th recipe, I was like, I'm going to go broke, because for these recipes, they had these seasonings. And I mean, they were great seasonings, don't get me wrong, but I was shopping at Whole Foods at the time, and like I'd pay $14 for this thing that I was just going to use like a teaspoon of in this particular recipe and then probably never use again. So anybody been there? I totally did that once upon a time when I was young and dumb. So budget's a factor. And then current health is a factor. So there might be some recommendations I can make to certain individuals, but if you're being treated for something, I'll use the sardine example. Excessive omega-3 intake for somebody who's taking a blood thinner right now in order to keep a blood pressure problem at bay is not beneficial. It's not a good idea, because omega-3s can further thin the blood, which can exacerbate your symptoms and be a contraindication because of the medication, right? So that one of our members says that paleo nearly killed her. There's a story there, but I'll ask about that at another time. So nutrition science can be amazingly complicated. And the question is, so how do I make my nutrition better? If it's really this complicated, how can I make my nutrition better? So first, we have our basic interventions, and I have them listed here. They're very simple. Journaling is a massive progressional thing that you can do as a basic intervention. Most people are not aware of what they're eating. They're just not. And if they are aware of what they're eating, they're not aware of patterns and trends in what they're eating on a regular basis. And so journaling in my practice from a coaching perspective, and basically anybody I ever talk to who wants to make progress in nutrition, it's my step one. It's like, look, keep a food journal, write down everything that goes into your face. And you can be as complicated about that as you want. You can, download MyFitnessPal, and for free, they will let you use their library of different foods. I mean, they've got my sardines in there. They've got a lot of things in there. They got my goji berry powder in there, and it will populate the carbs, the fats, the proteins, and the different micronutrients that are associated as well. So if you want to get an idea of how much protein you're eating in a day, or where most of your carbohydrates are coming from, that sort of thing, journaling is a very powerful tool. Then another basic intervention is whole foods, meaning cutting out the processing in your diet. So you might have heard that in the grocery store, the middle aisles, where the cereal is, and the taco shells, and the, I don't know, baked goods, all those aisles, that's highly processed foods. And there's a lot we could say about food processing and whatnot. Not all of it's bad either. But if one of the things that you're trying to do from a nutrition perspective is to improve yourself, staying on the outside of the grocery store, on those outside aisles, the produce and the meat and the dairy and the eggs and whatnot, and away from those maximally processed foods, that can be a big positive step in a great direction. Because when we eat whole foods, it requires our body to work pretty hard to break them down, and fosters the right kind of microbiome because of the fact, and fosters the right kind of hormonal cascade because of the fact. And so you get a lot of beneficial things without being too complicated about it when you cut out things like super processed stuff. Plant variety is another thing. Getting more plants in your world, getting blackberries and strawberries and all of the berries instead of just bananas as your source of fruits. Or from a vegetables perspective, there's more than carrots and green beans in the world. There's okra, and there's asparagus, and there's sweet potato, and there's apparently no other. I'm just kidding. There's chickpeas, and there's butternut squash. There's a bunch of veggies in the world that could be adding variety to your life and getting some more antioxidants and feeding your gut microbiome better. Getting good protein is a positive and powerful practical nutrition intervention, very basic to increase your protein intake. Healthy fats are another thing that you can be focusing on. Your water intake, limiting sugar, alcohol, caffeine, and smoking or vaping. And then the 90-10 rule, which is 90% of the time I'm working on making an optimal default for me, something that's healthy and good. I eat in order to build my body well and to fuel it well. Whereas 10% of the time I'm being celebratory, and it's really not that important what it is that composes that meal that at that particular time. The 90-10 rule is actually a pretty powerful basic nutrition intervention, because it takes all of the meals in your week. If you eat 4 meals 7 days a week, that's 28 meals. And so if you say 90-10, that's 2 to 3 meals a week that it really doesn't matter what you eat. And I'm not saying carte blanche, it doesn't matter at all. You might not have any digestive repercussions or something. I'm just saying that from a health and fitness perspective, you become what you consistently do. And so if 90% of the time, 25 meals out of the 28 in a week, that if those are healthy and great and a good protein profile and great healthy fats and minimal processing and good plant variety and all those things, then what happens is you build a better you over time. And the 10% of the time where you're getting those 2 to 3 meals out of the week that aren't really healthy for you, but you're eating them for different reasons. Maybe you're in a rush and you just needed something to eat, and maybe you're spending some special time with a special someone and you're not really that concerned about the healthfulness of this particular meal. Or maybe it's just been a long week and man, ice cream or carrot cake or whatever it is, that's the thing that you need right now. Great. If you're working to make progress in the nutrition world, the 90-10 rules are really helpful basic intervention. So I've said a lot of things here. If you have questions, please drop them in the app, or you can ask them here in Zoom. I'm going to real quickly go through some advanced nutrition interventions, because we're coming up on time here and I want to make sure that I have room for questions. But these are generally recommended to do with the help of a professional, because if you haven't done these nutrition interventions before, they can be pretty complicated and they generally bring a lot of questions with them. So supplementation, I put on the advanced list. if you're not familiar with your multivitamin and omega-3 and what brand of magnesium you should have and those sorts of things, then it's hard to venture into that space by yourself. We have some resources here in the Better Daily community. If you haven't checked them out under nutrition resources, I have a folder called supplements, where every week we're building out the education and the ones that I generally recommend to clients that I work with. So you're welcome to check that sort of thing out. Then we have stress and sleep management. Those are an advanced nutrition science thing. They can affect your microbiome. They can affect your recovery rates. They can affect your metabolic changes because of exercise. I'll give you, for instance, if you get poor sleep today, then tomorrow your insulin resistance will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 times worse than it is today. That means that you are 3 times more likely tomorrow to collect fat from the carbohydrates that you eat than if you got good sleep tonight, right? That's a really powerful statistic. It's a really powerful measurement, and in your sleep and your ability to recover from your day definitely has an impact on how your body regulates nutrition and how that plays out. So then we have macro periodization. Depending on your phase of training, you'll need more carbohydrates in more intense phases of training and fewer carbohydrates and more fats in less intense phases of training. And protein is also a part of that macro periodization. The more you break down your muscle tissue, the more you ask it to recover, the more protein you should consume. Then we've also got fasting on those advanced nutrition science fronts. So fasting, in my mind, is an advanced nutrition science intervention. It's a tool in the tool belt, something very important to have on your person and to be able to use, because it's a natural thing to go without food and your body knows how to handle that. But it's also advanced in the sense that using it intelligently is difficult. So those little app timers out there that are like, hey, if you have this particular belly, you should fast for 20 hours and only have a 4-hour feeding mode. They don't know what they're telling you. That doesn't that doesn't generally work out well for everybody. Otherwise, we would all be doing it. I'll say that. Then we have meal prep. That's kind of advanced because it takes hours and hours a week if you're going to take the time to prep your meals for the week and do that well. Metabolic conditioning is also an advanced nutrition science recommendation. How you manipulate your workouts in order to make your body do different things with regard to nutrition is important. And then hormones and blood values. So how much cortisol you have in your bloodstream, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all those things can affect how your body responds to the nutrition that you're putting in your body. So the basic interventions are basic. They're not hard to implement. The 90-10 rule, getting more protein, drinking more water, cutting out sugar, those things are all pretty simple to wrap your head around. But the advanced interventions, those are the things that people generally have questions about. They know they want to play around with fasting, for instance, or they know that they might want to add some supplementation to their life, but they're not really sure where to start. And so those are the sorts of things you can ask about you can ask about any of this if you like, but those are the sorts of things that are worth asking about in the Better Daily community if you have questions. And so I've got one final slide here, and then I'll take any questions from those of us joining us live here in the app or on Zoom that you have for this evening. But I did want to preview this before we get into it in our coaching group next week. So every 2 weeks in the Better Daily community, we get together as a group and we do a coaching session. So what you're seeing or experiencing right now is a workshop. A workshop is teaching on a subject to help you, stimulate some questions and thoughts around how you might go about your daily work differently. But our coaching groups are more discussion and interactive based. So it's less of me teaching and more of us as a group walking through those things together. So recently we had a coaching group where we all drew our health and fitness heaven and hell and shared that with each other and talked through those elements and actually gave each other some advice about how to deal with ailing parents and whatnot, which was really powerful. And then we also had a coaching group not that long ago where we shared we did some supplement show and tell. We shared what we're taking and why, and I spoke a little bit about some different supplements that you might want to make a part of your regimen if it made sense to do so. And so that was a good time. What we'll be doing this coming week is we'll be looking at what we call primary foods. And primary foods are the things in our lives that are feeding us, so to speak, that aren't food. So these things are joy, spirituality, creativity, finances, career, education, health, physical activity, home cooking, home environment, relationships, and social life. And each one of those, requires a little bit of explanation and stuff. And I won't get into that here. But what we'll be doing in our next coaching group is we'll actually be going through this and rating it, and then talking a little bit about some of the things that stand out to us about what we could improve and how we might go about doing that. And so it'll be a powerful coaching group. I hope you'll join us for it. It's very interesting. This is an exercise that I do personally with my wife twice a year, and this is something that we do to keep tabs on each other and think about some of the ways that we might support each other's progress and manifesting ourselves well. And it's nice also to touch base to see, touch base with yourself, like, oh crud, I forgot completely that I wanted to spend more time dancing in the kitchen while I cook. True story. I love to cook, but you don't need to see my dance moves. I won't be showing that to you tonight. So you're welcome. So anyway, that said, I appreciate you joining us for our nutrition workshop. I'm going to take some time here to answer any questions from those who have joined us live that I can do. And I'm actually going to start, while you're generating those questions, I'm going to start with Miss Janet's question, who dropped in the group earlier today. And she asked, hey, Alex, I'm coming back from vacation. Outside of the obvious, go back to eating well, do you have any tips for me about getting back into the swing of things and kind of undoing some of the damage that I've done? So she didn't say this in her question, but one of the things that Janet mentioned about her vacation is she had a little more alcohol to drink than she usually drinks. She was hanging out with her younger son and with his group of friends, and apparently they party kind of hard. I mean, party harder than we dads do in general. So to be young again, right? And so she's coming back from a week of that, a week of having more to drink than usual, having a little less sleep than usual, from an exercise perspective, not as consistent as she's used to being, and then also probably eating richer foods and stuff. And so that's such a good question, Janet. I'm glad you asked. She did mention that I'm doing a day of fasting to kind of reset my body and get back into the swing of things. And that was actually going to be one of the first things that I recommended, is a day of fasting. And the reason I recommend that is because once you've consumed a lot of rich foods or alcohol, one of the things you want to do is give your body an opportunity to have a break from all the processing. Okay. And it's not about like, oh, I gained weight and I'm gonna lose weight when I get home. Like that's not it at all. It's like, look, if you asked your body, if you asked anybody to do a significant amount of work over a period of time, hey, deal with these foods you never eat, deal with this alcohol you generally don't drink, deal with this stuff. Oh, and by the way, we're not gonna have our normal sleep schedule, and we're not gonna have our normal bed, and we're not gonna have our normal exercise and stuff. So you're asking your system to handle a lot more things, to process a lot more things without the normal support system that it usually has. And so fasting is a really powerful way to reset the system, to give it a break, to say, hey, we're back in our bed sleeping normally. We've got our normal exercise routine. We've got the normal things we see. We got the normal environment, all those things. And I'm not going to ask you to process any food right now. So that's a big deal. Make sure you drink enough water if you're taking that opportunity to fast when you get back. Drink enough water, hydrate yourself well. You can have a little bit of caffeine and stuff, not too much. Don't go crazy, but give yourself a little boost to start the day. The other thing I'd say is make sure you get enough rest in there, whether you're fasting or not. Taking a nap, getting that extra hour of sleep, going to bed a little bit early. If you can't sleep in the next morning, whatever that looks like, getting that extra sleep is a huge part. It's your body's natural bounce back process. It does it every single day. That's kind of what life is as a diurnal mammal. Is you wake up, the sun comes up, and you're like, party, live, try not to die. And then, night comes and it's like, okay, back to sleep. And, maybe we can bounce back from the damage of the day. I think Jesus said it best when he said, don't worry about tomorrow, because today has enough worries of its own. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, is what he said. And that's what sleep is. It's a bounce back from the evils of the day. And so getting enough sleep is a big deal. Make some extra time for yourself to get some rest. It's so hard to come off of a vacation and then dive right into work. And then especially if you're like opening work and it's like, look at all the things that didn't get done while I was away, so it's usually a much longer list than usual on that Monday. So building some time in there for you to rest, like getting a nap or sleeping enough, right? And then from a nutrition perspective, when you do break your fast or when you are eating, give yourself a perfect day. And by perfect, I mean, it's good fibers, vegetables that you're used to eating. It's good sources of complex carbohydrates. It's enough protein, some good healthy fats. We're not introducing strange sauces. We're not, trying to do anything new in the kitchen. Just the perfect day from a nutrition perspective. I like to also call this a default day. Give yourself a default day. And what that does is it kind of helps the body reestablish normalcy. The fast kind of gives your body a break from all the stuff that you were eating and processing. Rest really helps your body bounce back from that, but also giving yourself a normal day from that perspective is helpful. And then the last thing I'd say from a supplement perspective, you can really go hard on the omega-3 fish oils if you've got those on hand. Take an extra dose of them, maybe two actually, because omega-3 fatty acids actually lower the inflammatory markers on the inside of us. It makes us a little less raw, and so it makes it easier for our body to recover from things. And then curcumin is nature's ibuprofen, but it doesn't work that way. It's actually much less harsh on our systems than ibuprofen. But curcumin is the active phytosome in turmeric, which is a seasoning, and curcumin is just a much more concentrated form of that. So if I were in your shoes, I would be taking a mega dose of omega-3 fish oils, probably 3 doses in that day rather than just one. And then curcumin, I'd be taking that for the next couple of days just to help my body from an inflammatory perspective to reconstruct itself and not to be too raw, bouncing back into the things that I'm bouncing back into after being on vacation. So super good question. I hope that gives you some things to work on. And are there any other questions out there? I don't see anything popping in on the app. And I know I've got one of you live in here in the Zoom room with me. If I don't have any other questions, I'm going to call it a night. This is my first public appearance since being sick last week. And I'm not on my like 110% A game, but I'm not stupid either. So thanks for hanging with me. I appreciate it. I've done my best to hang with you party animals here. Thank you very much. Looks like we're good in the app. Thank you for joining me. I got some hearts and thumbs up. You guys rock. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me during the nutrition workshop in the Faithful 40 Challenge. We've got 30 days as of tomorrow, 30 more days in the Faithful 40 Challenge, recording our food journals together and continually working to improve ourselves 1% better every day. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm really looking forward to what we're accomplishing. And the next time we get together will be for our coaching group next week, where we talk about primary foods. And then you'll find our exercise workshop for the Faithful 40 Challenge, which I'm excited about as well. So until then, guys, kick butt, take names.